Hey, welcome back to the studio. Thanks for joining me. This lesson today is a small lesson from a larger course that I'm building, which will be called Painting Expressive Skies. And I expect that to take me 6 months or more. I'm already 3 months into it. And I just thought I'd give you a chance to see this one for free, just to whet your appetite for Painting Expressive Skies, and also just to get some feedback from you. I'd love to hear what you think of the lesson. If you could think of any way that it could be improved, or anything you didn't like, or some part of it that you did particularly like, I'd love to hear from you. Just shoot me an email and I will take that under consideration, and that'll help me build a better course for you in the future. Now, if you've ever been to the tropics, a little white sand island, you get some amazing towering clouds out there in the tropics. And if you're anywhere close to a volcano out there like Hawaii, that creates a certain amount of what they call VOG, which is volcanic fog. It's particulates in the air because of the volcanic activity. And at sunset, that really comes into its own because it makes these beautiful orangey, really warm light sunsets and sunrises. So those two things combined, the towering clouds and the beautiful warm sunset light, can make beautiful imagery, and that's what we're painting here today. And in this particular one, we're looking at a front lit cloud situation, and it can, given the right light situation like this at sunset, just create a nice opportunity to play with large, bold, flat colors, and specifically here, warm light. So let's take a beautiful image from the tropics and see how we can turn it into a beautiful painting. So I've got a really nice photo of a tropical beach here, really warm, direct evening light, and you can see from the angle of the shadows, the light is pretty much behind us, which means it's a frontal lighting situation. And what happens, as you can see, all the shadows get pushed to the outside of the object. See, the same thing happens around the edge of the cloud and the edge of little lumps that come out. All the shadows are pushed to the sides of those rounded forms. Now, it doesn't mean that the lighting in there is all flat. That's not just flat color, but it is very light, and there's a very, very subtle gradation from light into shadow. From light into shadow, wherever the object curves away from you, very subtle transition. And the darkest shadows are left for the sides of the object. You can see the same thing happening in the ball here. Very, very subtle transition from light to less light, and then just on the outer edges of the object it gets another step or two darker. So that's the front lit situation. It can be a really nice light effect, and it certainly at this time of the day is beautiful with that warmth in it, all that yellow in the setting sun. I'd really like to emphasize that in this painting, and some of the things I'm going to do is make the cloud bigger so that it takes up more space in the canvas and we get more of that warm color, something like that. And for me, I want this cloud to be the most spectacular part of the painting. That's why I've given it more room here in the design. So by making it bigger, that just makes more sense. Also want to reduce the size of the foliage here, cut that down a bit, which is going to give the cloud more room to play. And as for the overall warmth of the scene, which I really love and want to enhance, I want to add more warmth to the cloud, more warmth to the sky here, and I want to lighten and warm this big shadow here as well. So let's go and see how that works out on the canvas. Okay, so for this one we've got a 12 by 12 inch square taped out here. The board is MDF with 2 or 3 coats of acrylic primer on it, and I'm going to put a warm base layer in here first because we really want to accentuate the warm colors in this sunset front lit scene. So I've just got yellow ochre and white. These are the 3 brushes I'll be using, just big flat synthetics. This one to start with. Dip that in the water Always dip the brushes in the water for acrylics, except of course if you are just using a big dry brush for softening edges or blending, then you want a dry brush. Okay, so I'll get started here. So I'm adding a bit of water to this as well. Big brush. I see a lot of artists blocking in at this stage with a small brush, and I always wonder, why are you wasting your life blocking in with a tiny little brush when you could be just using a big brush and get it done in under a minute? Maybe it's that whole meditative thing of just doing lots of tiny little brush strokes. Could be. Okay, so what's nice about this is that it gives it another coat of paint, which means the surface is less absorbent, and so that the next layers of paint will just sit nicely on top of this rather than being absorbed into the substrate, in which case you have to use more paint to get more impasto effects, more thicker paint effects. Secondly, this color is going to show through the next layers of paint and provide not only a little bit of color harmony by showing itself throughout the whole painting, but also because it's largely blues in the sky and the water, we're going to get this nice shimmering effect between the cools that are on top and these little specks of warm background that are showing through that paintwork. So that's going to make a real nice shimmer, and we'll see that later on in the painting. Meanwhile, I'm going to let this dry probably for about an hour, since these are reworkable, and then we're going to do the whole painting in one session. So that's had an hour to dry. Now what I'm going to do is protect that layer with gloss medium varnish before I paint the next layer on, because this is a reworkable acrylic, interactive acrylic. If you've got normal acrylics, you won't have to do this step. This is just so that the next layer won't activate this layer. So, got some of this gloss medium varnish. I've watered it down a little bit so that it flows a bit better. And that's it. Just let that dry. Then we can put on the next layer of paint. So if this was oils you were going to paint in, you could do exactly the same here, starting with an acrylic base, or you could start with an oil base and use something like a fast drying medium like liquid to thin that paint out so it would set up and dry really fast, so that your next layer is good to go within maybe a couple of hours, depending on how thin that layer is. And in that case, I probably wouldn't add white to the mixture in the oils, because white is the slowest drying paint in the oil paints. So I'll let that dry, then we're going to work in the next layer on top. Another way you could do this, of course, when you lay in the first layer of paint, is to use the gloss varnish as a painting medium rather than water, and that would seal that whole layer pretty much the same as if you were doing this technique. So it's just another way to do it. Okay, so that's all dry now. That's had a couple of hours, and here's my new palette of colors. We've got phthalo blue, got naphthol red light, brilliant magenta, yellow ochre, acrylamide yellow, and titanium white. You could use cadmium red for this if you want, cadmium red mid or light, magenta, or maybe alizarin, which would be a little darker. You could use cadmium yellow light or lemon yellow for that. And I've got a 1-inch synthetic flat, very crisp edge on it, very nice to paint with, nice long bristles. So it's quite calligraphic and it holds a lot of paint, so your brush strokes go further. So I want to start off with the sky. So first of all, I'm going to block in where the horizon is, something like that, and foliage, something like that, the line of the beach. Alrighty, so lots of room for the sky to do its thing. And first we're going to do the gradation of the sky from light to dark in the background. Grab some white. First of all, we're going to work from light to dark in this instance. Normally you work dark to light. Seems to be just in areas where either a glowing light effect, you certainly work from light to dark there, or in a situation like this where I don't want to infect this greener color with the blue, and I know that it will dull it out if I did work down into that with the blue, so I'm going to work out in this direction instead, and that's just from experience. Okay, so got some white, add a little bit of yellow, not a lot, and a tiny bit of phthalo blue. So I've got a green going on there, and yeah, just brush that on. And it's okay to leave bits of the canvas showing through. In fact, that's what we'll be trying to do in a lot of this sky and a lot of this painting. That's all good. So paint that up further than what we wanted. And now just get some more color on there. Blue, white and blue. Just very small amounts of color getting added to this white. So the key is we want this color a little darker than that previous color, right? So in this painting, the sunlight is coming from behind us, but also a little bit to the side, so the sky is a little lighter in this direction. Okay, now we're going to get a little darker again, so you can see the progression of color right there on the palette. So with softer strokes you can blend down into that paint that you've just put down there, and thereby getting that gradation. It's okay to leave those bits there. So it's looking okay. Gonna give that brush a wash because I'm moving to the colors in the cloud now, or are a little warmer. So we'll start with a little yellow ochre and white down the bottom. Just have a little warmth down here, a few warm clouds. And next thing we'll do is grab some magenta, some white, a little blue. So I've got something that's a little mauve there, right? And I'm just going to work that out. Okay, and it takes a little while to get used to the acrylic colors drying a little darker than they are when they're wet. Keep at it and you just get a sense for that. Little soft edges, smushing it with your finger. So I'm just getting all the shadow side of that cloud ready to paint the mids and the lights on top of. But you can see I'm being very broad and painterly, so not getting carried away with tiny little details. And now we can move on to the warms. A little warmer, a little bit of red, some yellow. So this color should be slightly lighter in value than this dark here. It's all quite light. It's funny calling it a dark because it's not even a mid-value. See the mid-value of the palette? It's all in an effort to create this nice light warm feeling in the painting. Okay, so this is a half tone between the dark and the light, going for soft edges, mainly soft edges. So what I'm trying to do there is just trying to make marks that don't look like just a standard straight out brush stroke. Sometimes I like to leave your standard straight out brush strokes and just paint a whole painting like that. But if you do take the trouble to adjust your strokes and give them a little more abstraction, a little more randomness, then you'll find that the whole painting will look a little more natural. Okay, so next up we're going to go lighter again and just use white and a tiny touch of the yellow and the yellow ochre, and the goal of course is to get lighter and warmer than this color, and I really want a lot of that color, so I'm going to use the palette knife. I like this to be very thick paint, impasto, so always check it on your palette next to the color you've just mixed. Check it not only for value, is it lighter or darker, but also check it for temperature, is it warmer or cooler. Okay, so we've got lots of nice paint there, and I give that a little spray so that I can do some more softening of edges if I want. And let's see, nice big brush strokes. Whoops. Okay, now as this cloud gets further away down the horizon, it's going to get a little more blue, so I'm just going to take this color, add a little of that blue to it there. So this is atmospheric perspective and action, so it's a little bit darker and a little bit bluer. Just lighten that a little. And of course these details are smaller. Okie dokie. Could also use a little bit of that with some water to give a few little softer transitions in color through. So this isn't all just one flat color, so as it moves around into the shadow, it's getting a little bit darker, it's losing a little bit of its light. Just brushing that very softly over the surface. It just makes that cloud roll around into the shadow a little bit. Could even get some darker stuff from earlier on. Do that same sort of thing. It's pretty dynamic looking cloud. Interesting. And over here, can add a little more color to this cloud over here. There we go. Might actually extend this a little further. I just think it would look better. That's going to dry a little darker. Okay. Next thing is we can put the ocean in. Actually, before I do that, yeah, I think I'll just give this a little more crispness of form there, a little more interest. So hard edges. Okay. Actually, I scraped all that off, but I could do with a few little darker accent clouds there. So I'll do that. So a little blue, a little red. Doesn't take much of that phthalo to really change the color. Okay, that will dry a lot darker than that, so how's that feel? Okay, give a little spray, keep those colors wet. soften off those edges a little bit. Can just feather it on very softly to create soft edges. Okay, there we go. A little more interesting now. Now we'll get the ocean in. So that's a little darker again. Feel free to use tape or a ruler for that. Mind you, if you're going to use tape, you want that paint to be dry. There we go. And we'll put a little bit of yellow ochre in there, a little bit of blue. Just going to get a little dark green to make a wave face like that. Now I'll switch to a smaller brush, this one here. And I just want to mix a very slightly lighter blue to go on the horizon there where the water is calmer and it's reflecting a bit more of the sky. Okay, and go slightly lighter again. Just get some of that flat water on the sand where it's reflecting the sky. Just like that. And while we're in there, might as well do a little foam. Just white, tiny bit of either or both of the yellows. Just going to warm it up with that real warm end of the day sunlight, golden hour. Maybe there's another little wave breaking out here as well, just for interest's sake. Okay. A little bit of whitewash there. All right. Oops. I think I need a bit more cloud down here before I start putting in the trees there. Okay. All right, that'll do it. I'll put the beach in next and I'll leave the darks till last. So here's something I've learned to do over the many years of painting beaches. Lay in this warm color first. It's already there, but we're going to mix the paint a little bit with this. So I just need a thin layer of that. All right. Next thing, we can put the light in. Gonna need some more white paint. I use this synthetic filbert brush just for a change. And first up, I'm going to put the light on the sand on this pretty chunky paint, because in a way it's the sister to this light here. So it's going to leave some chunks in it. That's just chunks of sand and stuff. What's that word? Detritus? Detritus? Flotsam? Jetsam? Okay. Next, so I've got that. It's a bit dry. I'll just give it a little squirt. Very hot in here today. Summer's coming. Just a thin layer. Right. Now we want basically a cool grey, so white, blue, and a little touch of a little touch of the yellow. Push it towards green, because some of it is reflecting this stuff here, some of it is reflecting that stuff there. So this is a soft shadow on the beach, and A really interesting thing about shadows is that depending on the light and all the bounce light, they can be very dark and foreboding, very dramatic, or they can be soft and light filled like this, with this airy feel that there's so much light around here that a really strong shadow just can't exist in the situation. So that's all going on in a very painterly manner. I'll actually get a little more of that. I'd like to make a little more impasto feel to some of that. So the stuff here, could even use a palette knife. It's always nice getting that dragged out palette knife texture, just using the flat of the palette knife. Okay, just changing the color a little bit there, going a little more mauve. Alrighty, so you can see there's little bits of that warmth just popping through there, which is really nice. Hey, I just wanted to apologize. The camera quit on me and I missed out that whole bit of painting the foliage, so what I'm doing is going back and going to demonstrate that for you on a separate panel so you can see the technique of how that's done. Okay, so there's the base. I'm going to redo this for you because I didn't want you to miss out on that section. So I've jumped forward into the future where the whole painting is finished, and I'm just going back and I'm going to show you how that foliage was done. So just blue and red and white. Like that to start with, and it's a little dry. So really it's just a texture that's going on. It looks like details from a distance, which I always really admire if a painter can do that. But yeah, up close it's just texture and random brush strokes. So that's a blue going in, and now I'm just going to make a darker version of that with a little bit of the yellow ochre in it to push it towards green, and work into that. Maybe a little more green would be good. Okay. So when you're painting the base of this foliage on the sand, just think about having a flat base to it and then brushing up to give the effect of that stuff growing out of that sand, and think about the angle that sand dune is on. Okay, I might go a little darker again. And this is a little warmer, got a little more red in it. So remember, if you want to neutralize a green, just add red and that grays it down, because they're opposite each other on the color wheel. Now let's go for a slightly lighter, more colorful green. But we'll start with the shadow color for that. Maybe something like that. And so this shape here, it's important. You could just make this all the same value, all the same color, but it's more interesting if you can break your dark shapes into a variety of that main color, bending it or pushing it around the color wheel a little bit. So this has gone a little lighter and a little greener, and it will go more so as I add more paint to it. Alrighty. Same goes for light shapes. If you've got a big area of light like that sky, be sure to not have the whole thing just flat color. Be sure to make gradations through it, bending color, pushing color slightly around the color wheel, because every shape, every big shape especially, is an opportunity for variety. And if you don't have variety in a painting, it won't last long on a wall or in somebody's eye or mind. So just using the paint brush on the side, you get a nice broken texture which can imitate grass, dune grasses. Alrighty, and put a little more flotsam and jetsam little bits around, makes it look more natural, and we can work back into that with the color of the sand dune and shade. So now I'm going to throw some light into this area here. First thing I want to do is warm up the shadow areas, and then I'll paint the lights on top. So that'll do for warming up. Just really dragging very lightly to get a texture onto the canvas. Yep. Okay, give that brush a little wipe, and then more yellow ochre, maybe some bright yellow. Pays in these passages to undermix the paint, so let it mix on the canvas rather than on the palette, and that way you get more interesting paint effects. Just happy little surprises if you plan it like that. Start to sound like Bob Ross when I say happy little surprises. And that's okay with me. And so it's got a little darker as it moved into the more dense area back here. Okay. So if you don't like that shape of your tree, that's all good. You can change it. You can go back in with the sky color up here. And paint around it. You can just carve it. The trick is mixing the same color as you already had there, because especially with acrylics it dries a little darker, as I keep saying, so it's quite the trick to paint on a dry color and color match it. So you just got to paint it a little lighter than you think it will be. Okay, so let's say we wanted a more palm tree type feel. Something like that, although palm trees do have very skinny trunks, so I'm going to watch that. Skinny trunks for the size of them. They can fall over, and there's a lot of weight in those trees, and they can cut a house clean in half if they fall onto the house. So there's companies who specialize in cutting down palm trees in the tropics when they get too big in some countries. Okay, it'd be good to work some of this color back into there as well. Nice thing about oils, if you were painting with oils, is that all these mixtures would still be wet on your palette. You can of course use a stay wet palette for acrylics. You just Google how to make one of those, and also keep spraying your paint with water. That helps. And one trick I've seen is if you're using a stretch canvas on a wooden frame, you can wet the back of the canvas with the spray bottle, and that stops the paint from drying so quickly. That's a good little tip. Now I can work a few little things back in there. So you may have made a bigger mess than me here, and that's why you'd really want to come in with this paint and tidy up these areas. Mine wasn't too bad because I already made the mess there and tidied it up, so I was aware of that before I went into this second one of it, which is always nice when you're doing a copy. Then I get a really warm impasto color for the light sand. Impasto means thick paint, if you haven't heard that one yet. And get that on there really thick. You may have already seen that. I just wanted to finish my little scene. And if you get hard edges on these things, these little bushes here, you can break them, soften them up. Before we go, just something to be aware of is it's very easy to make these shapes all the same size and same shape, so try and avoid that. I think maybe this one has done this little area a little bit better, maybe these shapes are a little same. Just be aware of our tendency to make patterns everywhere, right? If once we've got a good shape, our brain just says, oh, we'll make another shape just next to it. So be aware of that and try and fight against it, because it looks a lot more natural when you make shapes that are all slightly different. That includes these negative shapes of the sand as well. They're all just shapes. It's all an interesting jigsaw puzzle. Okay, just a little stronger down here. Maybe a little trunk in here. Yep. So some white with a little yellow in it. And where will we put those? Maybe down here. Maybe one higher. And even higher. There we go. A little bit of red to sign that with. Just over here. Now I think we can pull the tape off. There we go. See that line there? It's a little too harsh. Just break that up. Better. Okay, hope you have fun doing that one. So I think the one big takeaway for this one is feel free to adjust a scene, a photograph, or whatever you're looking at that you're going to paint. Adjust that to suit the thing that you love the most. It's my job as an artist to convey how I feel about this beautiful world, this beautiful experience that we're having. And so the way I do that, or I try to do that, is to look at the things that I love about the painting and accentuate those things so that the other person can really take notice of, pay attention to the things that I'm exaggerating. In this case, it was the towering clouds and the warm sunlight. So I adjusted the design and the coloring to accentuate those things, made the clouds bigger, made the light warmer. So in doing that, it's much easier for the viewer to get that feeling of what I love about the scene and connect that way. So that's the one big takeaway for this, and I think a lot of my lessons, is that don't be afraid to change an image or a scene or a photo to talk about more expressively the things that you love about that scene, so that you can gift those to your audience. Remember to upload a photo of your painting to the website so that I can see it, so we can all see it. Don't be shy. We all love to see artwork at any level. I always feel like my paintings could be better. You're always going to feel like your paintings could be better. Don't worry about it. Everybody's in the same boat. Just upload those photos and get used to people seeing your imagery. Remember, this is just one short lesson from a much larger course called Painting Expressive Skies, which is due for release in whenever I finish it, hopefully in the next 3 months. So I hope you enjoyed this little taster and have fun painting this one. And I'll see you in the next one. Happy painting.